Hey everyone, David here, back again to review another episode of The Walking Dead. This time it is for the third episode of Season 5 entitled 4 Walls and a Roof. Which, there's got to be a door in there somewhere, otherwise nobody can get into this place. That doesn't make any sense. It's the kind of thing that only Christopher Walken would think of. And as always, spoilers for the episode will follow in this video, so do not watch if you haven't caught up with The Walking Dead. But man, they are, in my opinion, 3 for 3 so far. They have struck this momentum that they're striking in every episode, and I like to call this third episode that we were presented with this week as the confirmation episode, which is kind of appropriate considering that one of the new characters is a priest. One that seems to be sticking with the group for quite a while, and I'm looking forward to see what arc he takes, especially after what we get from him in this episode. But the reason why I call it the confirmation episode is because there were so many things that almost everybody speculated from last week's episode, from beginning to end, that were then confirmed in this episode, saying, yeah, you were right about that, you were right about that, now we're going to go ahead and flesh it out and continue moving the story along and not take things and drag them out too long, even though there were a couple of trade-offs. Right at the opening, we get two confirmations. One I actually already knew about, and I was kind of surprised that certain people weren't picking up on this. They were like, is that who I think it was? And I'm like, yeah, I mean, could you not tell from that one shot? Well, yeah, maybe it was just one shot, and maybe you needed to take your DVR, rewind it, and pause it to make sure that it was him. But the first thing that we get confirmed is that that was indeed the guy that Tyrese said he killed, but he didn't kill, and it was because of them that Garrett came back and took Bob away from the group. And Tyrese now has to rest with this, and who knows if maybe that's going to be brought up in future episodes, because it is a bit of a shoe dropper there, so I'm interested to see where that goes. But that was the guy that Tyrese said he had killed, but evidently he didn't. And that gets confirmed in this episode, not only from the opening scene, but then later on when Garrett is saying, "Hey, he's guessing who's there in the church," and he says, "Martin's friend Tyrese." If that couldn't have spelled it out for you anymore, I don't know what would. The second confirmation that we get in that opening scene is that Bob indeed did get bitten in that scene in the food place, and the place that Gabriel led them to. He did in fact get bit underwater. And they went with a storyline or story plot device that apparently gets utilized in the comics, but it was with a different character or a different group of characters. I'm not sure. It might have involved the Hunters as well, but I don't know. I haven't caught up with the comics just yet during that particular segment in the comics. But I do know that subplot or that plot device, more appropriately, was used in the comics, and they went ahead and used it in the show of Tainted Meat. And one of the things that I liked is that they made the characters ask one another, "Are we gonna turn or what?" Because so far the science behind Tainted Meat within this world of The Walking Dead is something to still wonder about. And by the end of this episode, based on the events that transpired, which I'll get to, we still don't know for sure if eating somebody that got bit will then activate the virus within yourself, because you already got the virus, but you didn't get bit, but you did eat somebody that did get bit, so maybe you're indirectly metaphorically speaking, getting bit. I don't know. So far, we do not know how that works. And then after that, the episode just moves at a brisk pace, hitting one story beat that we needed to get to another. I mean, they already know that Carol and Daryl are gone, and Bob. They don't even have a scene where they realize, like, hey, where are they? No, they right away show Sasha looking for them, and then you have Rick and who else? Tyrese coming out saying, yeah, we can't find Daryl and Carol either. Then they finally confront the priest, knowing that there's something shady going on here, which led to probably one of my favorite scenes, if not possibly my favorite scene of this episode, and that is, ironically, the father's confession, or the priest's confession, which is yet again another confirmation that we get in this episode, one that I've heard other people speculate about, and I kind of threw my opinion in there as well, that maybe the thing that the priest did that he feels so bad about is actually something that he didn't do, which is to help other people, and maybe that explains the writing on the outside of the church. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. He locked people away because he was a bit of a coward, and they were, like he said, damning him to hell. And man, I can't remember the actor's name. I want to say Lawrence Gillard Jr., although that might be Bob. I'm not sure. I don't think that's Bob. No, I think that was Bob, Lawrence Gillard Jr., and I'll get to him in a second. But the guy who plays the priest, man, he was amazing in that scene where he just breaks down. I mean, we've only had this character for 2 episodes, and I'm already feeling for him. So, he's becoming very quickly one of my favorite characters. Not because he's a badass or anything. I mean, he's quite the opposite. He's a coward, but because he's so complex and because he has that whole a belief system that gets tangled up with religion, nonetheless, that makes for a very fascinating character that I'm looking forward to seeing develop as the season goes along, and looking forward to what he brings to the group, whether it be drama or camaraderie. I don't know, but I'm looking forward to seeing what he brings to the table, as well as that actor. And from there, we also get the decision of splitting our group up, which eventually comes to fruition, about Abraham, Rosita, Eugene going to DC, but because of how the world has become, able bodies are now essential. Like, if you can get somebody who's genuinely a good person here, they're super valuable. They're more valuable than money, which leads to that confrontation between Ford and Rick about whether or not they should leave right now or stay behind to not only take out these hunters but also figure out where Carol and Daryl went off to. And that scene between Ford and Rick was immensely intense. I dare say just as intense as the scenes that involved the walkers or the hunters, because it was shot well. It wasn't over dramatic. In fact, there wasn't even no music. That just made the tension feel so thick that you can cut it with a red machete. But eventually they strike a deal that, like I said, also comes to fruition by the end of the episode, and that is that if they stay and help out for that one night, then the next day they get to take off along with Maggie, Kara, that's her name, Kara, the lesbian girl, and Glenn. Which is funny because now we're kind of sort of back to square one, back in season 4 where it was them, and I guess for good reason, because of the fact that they traveled together. Ford made the decision that, hey, if you're offering people to come with me, I want them, and them. I want them on my basketball team, and that's the deal that they strike. And they do part amicably. Again, that's a cool thing that I liked, is that they were able to get over that tense moment they had earlier where they were about to come to a fist fight. But they ended it amicably, and they said that, hey, we'll catch up just as soon as we find Daryl and Carol, but because that's their main priority. And Ford respects that. He respects it so much that he writes a little note on the map saying, sorry, legitimately, sorry I was an asshole. And that just makes me like the character more and make me respect his viewpoint, because the things that he was saying during that very tense moment with Rick, they made sense. It was that scene where I legitimately could not side with one or the other, because I'm like, you got a point. No, wait, you got a point. And that's the kind of drama that I'm hoping that The Walking Dead delivers every week, because we were lacking quite a bit of that in the last season, and I'm very happy that they're bringing it in this one. What was lacking in last season that they're bringing here so far in the first 3 episodes of season 5, and I'm hoping that they keep on going, is pacing, moving things very briskly. Wasn't expecting that the hunters were going to be taken out in this episode, and in such a very sweet way, with Rick keeping his promise of taking that guy out with the machete. And it was sweet, but it was also very grounded, because you had some characters there that didn't want to be very vicious, or almost as vicious as these hunters were. Because if you've noticed, not only was Sasha at the end very uncomfortable with what she did, but Maggie didn't even do anything. In fact, she was kind of looking on with somewhat of a horrific look on her face, because as much as she wants to defend the people that she loves, she doesn't want to become one of them. And that's almost the tipping point that Rick and those others needed to take those people out, because, like Rick said, it was either them or the hunters. And I'm glad, because like I said, that opens opportunities for the show to continue moving at a brisk pace without dragging something for too long. If there was only one tiny nitpick to them killing off the hunters within practically just 1 episode, is that Garrett was legitimately becoming a good villain. I've stated that in the season finale from season 4 and the premiere for this season, he was kind of bland. I was like, okay, I'm not really seeing it for this guy. But it was in the last scene from last week's episode and his scenes in this one that I was like, okay, this guy's now genuinely intimidating, and he struck fear in me. And one of the things I loved about it is that he was doing it in such a calm, fashion. You know, he was saying it in a way where he's just savoring. Like Bob said, he's eating people's flesh like it was nothing. And the delivery by that actor was creepy. And I'm like, okay, this is a good villain. So I was a little bummed to know that he was in fact taken out in this episode. But if he had to be taken out, it had to be with that machete. Unfortunately, the hunters are not the only people that we say goodbye to in this episode. Like I've stated, we get the confirmation that Bob did in fact get bit. And with that comes the bittersweet end to Bob Stuckey in the story for the Walking Dead TV show. We say goodbye to him in this episode, and the reason why I say bittersweet is because it's bitter that we see a character that is so optimistic and positive about some of the most dreadful situations go, because characters like that are needed in a story like this to inject some levity into the story, to give people hope. And I'm just expecting another one to stop on by. Maybe we'll see that come in the form of Father Gabriel, in which he develops into that much more optimistic character once he overcomes his own personal demons. But this world is all. The reason why I also say it's bittersweet is because this type of character doesn't belong in this world. I mean, if you really put it into perspective, you go, you know, I'm almost kind of glad you died, because now you get to rest. Now you don't have to look over your shoulder to make sure you're not going to get eaten in the most painfully way possible. And so you take some relief in knowing that for a character like Bob. And it's the kind of thing that you relate to in real life. You know, if you know a family member or something like that has been suffering for years, and finally they pass away from an illness or whatever, you're like, okay, now they don't suffer. It's the same thing with Bob. He's such an optimistic and very powerful person in terms of being caring and loving and whatnot, that you don't want him to suffer anymore. You don't want him to be in this world anymore. So that's why I call it as a bittersweet ending to a character. And you know, this kind of world has become so dark that it's not built for it's not made for characters like Bob. I mean, we saw it already 2 times in the show. We saw it with Dale, we saw it with Herschel, and now Bob is the next one. So I'm hoping that this won't influence the writers to not include any more optimistic characters, because we've caught on to the fact that if you're optimistic in the world of The Walking Dead, you may not live for a long time. But I'm hoping that they bring a character that maybe they already introduced us with, like I said, in Father Gabriel, that will take that arc and then become a much more positive person that will give other people hope. And with that said, I have to commend the actor who plays Bob Stuckey. I think his name is Lawrence Gilliard, but I might be completely wrong. Maybe that's the father. I'm not sure, but I think that's him, and he did a really good job in this episode. You know, he was kind of on cruise control on last season and part of the first episode of this season so far, but it was in the last one and here where I think that actor brought his A game. It's just kind of unfortunate that it was at the last moments of his life, but if there's any way to go out, is it's in a way that in which you get to deliver a great performance. And with that, the episode ends with the reason why, or at least one of the reasons why I kind of liked that the hunters were taken out in this episode, and that is to make way for new antagonists. And those new antagonists are more than likely going to be the people that took Beth and Daryl and Carol went after, because I did not, like I said, I do not watch those next time on The Walking Dead snippets. But if I'm assuming correctly here, and judging from that ending of having Daryl return and turning to his side and saying, "Come on out," and then we don't see who comes out after Michonne asks for Carol, it looks like next episode we'll finally get the answer of who took Beth, what happened to her, are they going to make it out alive, and from the looks of it, I think that the next episode is solely going to center on just them, which means that we're going to do that whole time jump thing that we've seen on The Walking Dead before, where now we're winding back the clock, and now we're going to focus on the events that happened with Daryl and Carol, while all this other stuff with the hunters was going down with Rick and the group. And then finally, by the end of the episode next week, we're finally going to come to that point where Daryl finally meets up with the group at the church, and then the episode after that we will progress and see where things go. But next week's episode is solely going to focus on Daryl, Carol, and Beth's fate, and see what happened with her. And I'm definitely looking forward to that, and I'm also looking forward to seeing how Morgan will fit into this whole picture, because we still know that he's out there following those marks that the hunters were leaving back, and hopefully that trail will lead back to Rick. And like I said, so far, The Walking Dead is doing really good this season. I'm very, very satisfied. It does scare me into feeling like maybe we might hit a lull because we're still talking 16 episodes and we're only into 3. So maybe the writers will have to put in a couple of filler episodes here and there. But I'm hoping that they were able to think ahead and have a plan so that we can avoid those kind of lulls. And so far, I'm very satisfied with the season. So I'm gonna give episode 3 of The Walking Dead season 5 4 walls and a room. Some of these titles are a little confusing, but I'm going to give this episode a really high 8 out of 10. I was on the verge of giving it a 9, but I just didn't feel like the stuff that I really, really liked about it, I loved. It didn't cross that line for me, but it's still a really good episode that is keeping the momentum of the season so far, and let's hope for another good episode next week. So thank you guys for watching. Let me know what you guys thought of the new episode, and I'll see you guys later.